As we all know, things did not go well for the Kraken at the end of the road trip, but after a long time on the road, they're finally back home after 2 much needed days of rest. Unfortunately, it seemed like nothing had changed. Except for they were actually missing one more key player. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken have now lost their 4th straight game, 3-1 to the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are a good team, but at the same time, we're coming in on the second half of a back-to-back after having lost the night before, and it also lost 5 of their last 6 games, plus we're starting their backup goaltender in Samsonov, who has struggled more than just about any goaltender in the NHL to this point in the season. And yet, they still get a tied for franchise low 17 shots on goal and only score on 1 of them. So then clearly, at the very least, there are some very good reasons to be frustrated, if not downright angry at this terrible performance by the Kraken in their 4th straight loss now, once again at home against the Leafs. However, at the same time, there are still some understandable reasons why the Kraken might have some struggles against a team, the Leafs, that, even if they are in the second half of a back-to-back, had struggles of late, and are starting a goaltender that's been one of the worst in the NHL to this point in the season, that the Kraken then make look like a Vezina candidate. They still do have one of the best top 6s in the NHL, and the Kraken do have an illness that's on the tail end of it, but working its way through the last couple of players in the locker room. They have a couple of very key injuries, missing their top center in Matty Beniers, as well as their top defenseman and probably best player to this point in the season in Vince Dunn. 2 key injuries that have definitely played a big role in the struggles through the 3 games leading into this game against the Maple Leafs. And then you go and lose another one of actually your next best center in Yanni Gourde to a 2-game suspension. Which, while we're on the subject of that Gourde hit on Ekholm at the end of the Oilers game, that gets him the 5-minute major in-game and then 2-game suspension afterwards, I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about that specifically in that whole situation again, because there were, in the last video, a number of people in the comment section that were not terribly happy with my take and reaction to that whole situation after the Oilers game. And part of that is that these are recap and reaction videos, and unapologetically, they're videos mostly for Kraken fans by a Kraken fan, so there's going to be some bias built in there. But in the end, I think, even with them being mostly Oilers fans, and Oilers fans in my experience don't always have the best takes, for the most part, I think they were right in this case. This hit from Gourde was an absolutely stupid, dangerous play by Gourde that probably did get what it deserved, not only in the 5-minute major, but also the 2-game suspension. Or maybe I should say, I think Gourde got the right discipline from this hit based on how the NHL says it wants to discipline and discourage this type of play in its game. As they say, they want to protect player safety, especially when it comes to head injuries, and preventing those concussions and types of things that can have long-term effects on a player after their career, even if the NHL still refuses to acknowledge the connection between hockey and CTE, which is ridiculous in its own right, but they have come out over these last few years and really tried to at least put on a face like they're going to crack down on head injuries and predatory hits like this one, where a player's targeting the head and leaving his feet to do so along the boards like Gourde did. Which really shouldn't matter whether or not he connects very well. Gourde certainly did not connect very much with this hit, but again, that shouldn't really matter when it comes to disciplining the intent of the play, and Gourde's intent was stupid and reckless. Unfortunately, however, we do not live in a world where the NHL has any kind of consistency when it comes to actually protecting its players from head injuries or really any kind of injury whatsoever, as they even last season said that they were going to try to crack down on cross-checks to protect players from back injuries or other type of things that can come from cross-checks. And while they did kind of do that off and on last season, this season it's right back to cross-checks galore all over the place. And that's part of what led Gourde to make this boneheaded decision, as he was constantly getting cross-checked in the back by mostly Connor McDavid without any kind of protection or calls from the official. They just let that go, eventually leading to a frustrated, still stupid with no excuse for it, but frustrated play from Gourde, where he then basically steps up to the wheel of discipline, spins it, and it comes up with 2-game suspension. And that is where a lot of the frustration really comes in, certainly from a fan perspective, though I know for a fact that it's not just fans that are frustrated and downright angry at times with the complete and total lack of consistency when it comes to how discipline is handed down from the NHL and when it's handed down or how much of it's handed down. Just Yeah, basically a spin of the wheel from the NHL whenever there's something that could potentially lead to discipline. And certainly from a Kraken standpoint, where it seems like the only consistency is the fact that whenever there is a situation that could lead to discipline, whether it's a Kraken player laying a hit on an opposing player or an opposing player laying a hit more often on a Kraken player, you can pretty much guarantee that whatever discipline is going to be handed down is worse for the Kraken, which has been true for quite a while now, certainly going all the way back to last season when Alexiak got a 2-game suspension for a guy basically running into his shoulder with his face. And yeah, Alexiak did have to be a little bit more careful. The guy didn't see Alexiak, he did see the guy coming, and yeah, the hit pretty much only happened because Alexiak was that much taller than the guy he hit. Still, it's a hit to the head. Alexiak has to be more careful. You accept that that suspension is trying to protect a player with a head injury. But then 2 games later, Schultz gets boarded in the head right into the boards by Lombard by the Panthers. There's not even a minor penalty in that instance, and he doesn't get a hearing after the game. Which at the same time you can kind of understand because the head of the Department of Player Safety is an ex-Panther player. And if you don't believe me that that plays a role in the Panthers getting disciplined, just look at the track record of their players getting disciplined over the last few years. I think there's a little something there. And then we come to this year where, well, actually not even coming to this year, there was still the hit on Beniers by Tyler Myers last year that had a 2-minute minor and nothing more than that, not even a hearing for that hit. It knocked Beniers out for 2 games with a concussion and he missed his rookie year All-Star appearance. And then coming to this year, there's McCann laying face down on the ice, getting cross-checked in the back by Mangiapane. That also got a 2-minute minor. Yep, just a 2-minute minor for that one. Maybe a 4-minute. I can't really remember. Certainly not a major. And he once again did not even have so much as a hearing for discipline. And then just here in the last week, ever since the end of the winning streak, actually that last game of the winning streak in Columbus against the Blue Jackets, Beniers takes a horrible, dangerous hit right into the boards after the puck had left by Sillinger, ramming Beniers' head, side of his head into the half boards right in front of the Kraken bench, which knocks Beniers out of that game. He didn't come back to the third period and hasn't played for the Kraken since, as he's been on IR, missing ever since that game and for these last 4 losses. A pretty important part of the Kraken team being that he's the first line center. And of course, now we have a few games later, Gourde doesn't injure Ekholm or even come close to injuring Ekholm with his hit, even if Ekholm did try to sell it right up until the whistle blew, and then he had no trouble being perfectly healthy enough to go fight Gourde in front of the net and continue to play games afterwards, including the rest of that game. And so now the Kraken are missing both Gourde and Matty Beniers, 2 of their best centers. In fact, I would say their 2 best centers. Wemberg's been pretty good this season, but either way, the Kraken missing 2 very important players because the NHL just can't figure out its own crap. That having been said, even if both hits were correctly disciplined, say Sillinger does get a 5-minute major and gets suspended for a couple of games, the suspension obviously isn't going to affect the Kraken since they aren't going to play the Blue Jackets for another couple more games. And, well, Beniers is still injured either way. It certainly would have helped to have a 5-minute major, though the Kraken still won that game handily. And Gourde, again, I do think, by the way the NHL should be and says they want to be officiating things, did get proper discipline. Of course, based on how the NHL actually disciplines things, the one kind of consistent that you can actually tie between, regardless of who the team is whether or not there's an injury on the play. Beniers does get injured, there's no discipline. Ekholm doesn't get injured, which usually does increase the chances of discipline. And Gourde gets a 5-minute major and 2-game suspension. So, again, no consistency whatsoever. And yes, I understand the argument that 2 wrongs don't make a right, and Gourde getting properly disciplined should be applauded, even if it's not a great thing that other hits pretty consistently don't get properly disciplined. The problem is, from a Kraken standpoint, it always seems to go against the Kraken, which then does put Seattle at a bit of a competitive disadvantage. Anyway, sorry for going on a bit of a rant there, but it needed to be said, needed to get that off my chest again, and probably will have to do so again sometime in the future, as the likelihood of the Department of Player Safety not becoming a joke in the near future is pretty low. They're pretty much a complete joke at this point. I don't think there's too many people that can disagree with that and not admit that it's, yeah, just completely incompetent when it comes to that part of the NHL. Me saying so is probably not going to change anything no matter how many times I say it, but the more people say similar things, maybe eventually Bettman will I don't know, not turn a blind eye to it and actually fix things over there. I will say that when it comes to the complete lack of consistency and incompetence of that department, it's hard not to notice when they do hand out a 2-game suspension that seems a bit out of character for them, that 2-game suspension to an important player of the Kraken roster comes right before they play Toronto and Chicago. So, not saying that had anything to do with the decision, but it's also hard to say that it didn't have anything to do with it. With that all having been said now, we do still have a game to get to, a game where once again the Kraken are without their top center in Beniers, their second best center I would say in Gourde, though Wemberg has been playing pretty well, but certainly 2 of their best centers, definitely lacking then in center depth, as well as their best player and best defenseman in Vince Dunn. Not to mention the fact that there are still some players dealing with things, whether it was illness or potential minor injuries of their own, as both Eberle and Schwartz missed practice time between these last 2 games. Yamamoto also missing practice time, though he ended up being a scratch in this game, and I think that had more to do with performance in games. Obviously, he was the culprit on the offside of what would have been the game-tying goal in the game against the Oilers. So yeah, probably got a bit of a seat there for that play. Either way, the Kraken are now down to a point where they're having to play both Devon Shore and John Hayden, as well as obviously Riker Evans, though I don't think that's that much of a downgrade based on how Evans has been playing. And again, it would be one thing if the Kraken were missing, say, 1 center and a winger, or 2 wingers, but being that they were missing 2 centers and 2 of their best centers, it did mean that the lines got shuffled around quite a bit in this game, just put in a blender really all night long, with the only consistent line being the line of McCann centering both Eberle and Tatar, taking that spot from Beniers. And McCann is, he has played center for the Kraken a fair amount. He played mostly center the inaugural season, but when the Kraken are at their best and he's at his best, he's on the wing. So the Kraken already up in the lineup playing guys that are not typically centers for them. In fact, with Belmar still on the IR as well, really the only healthy regular center for the Kraken was Alex Wemberg. And that probably played a pretty big role in how the Kraken ended up losing almost 3/4 of the faceoffs in this game, which certainly has an impact all of its own, but also doesn't help when you're facing a team that has the top 2 centers of Matthews and Tavares. And sure enough, just a few minutes into the game, after a couple of pretty cowardly hits early on, both on Tanev behind the Toronto net at their end of the ice, late after the puck had left, one of which, the first one, is called a penalty, though Tanev gets up and takes exception to it, ends up getting traded roughings. The Kraken still with a power play that really doesn't end up going much of anywhere. Then, not long after that power play comes to an end, Tanev once again in on the forecheck, actually with a bit of a rush chance, gets the shot off, and then after the whistle is blown, he receives yet another late, cowardly hit from a Leafs defenseman. This one doesn't draw a call. Tanev once again takes exception to it, gets up, and is willing to fight, but whoever number 2 is, I forget his name, cowers away from Tanev in fear. Eventually, Tanev does end up getting his fight later on in this first period after laying a huge, clean hit on Liljegren. That fight with McCabe gets both of them put in the box, but before that happens, Toronto breaks the ice about 7 minutes in, and it is Austin Matthews who does it off of a very nice pass from Marner behind the net as he gets it out with Larson all over him. Matthews, all alone in front of Decord, shows off why he is the leading goal scorer in the NHL and probably the best goal scorer right now in the NHL. 38 goals on the season. This one made it as he just has a nice move to barely get it around the toe of Decord and into the corner of the net, giving Toronto that 1-0 lead. A lead that they would maintain all the way to the first intermission through another Kraken power play late in the first period that also goes nowhere. In fact, I think it was even worse than their first power play. Really, the only good chance the Kraken get in this first period is one that really should have scored from Schwartz off of a rebound, but Samsonov has probably his best save of the season, or certainly based on his stats, it has to be one of his best saves of the season on Schwartz here to keep this one out and keep Toronto in the lead going into a second period where early on they get a power play. And given the forward talent that the Leafs have on their team, it should come as no surprise that for the 3rd time in the last 3 games, the Kraken are up against one of the 5 best power plays in the NHL, but the penalty kill remains strong for the Kraken here over this last stretch as they once again kill off this power play. I guess they did give up 2 power play goals to the Oilers, but other than that, they've been pretty good here of late, and they keep the puck out of the net, thanks in large part to Decord on this first power play, right up until, as the power play comes to an end, the Leafs regroup, get a rush chance back the other way, and the Kraken, sloppy in transition as they are trying to get a change out of the penalty kill, allow an odd man chance, and the puck is in the back of the net off of Nick Robertson, and it's 2-0 Leafs. Once again, not much Joey could have done about this one, and the Leafs are right back on the power play after it goes in with a 2-0 lead. Fortunately, the Kraken kill off this power play without nearly as much trouble as the first one, and continue to keep the puck out of the net after the power play comes to an end. And eventually, in the back half of the second period, with the Leafs having just gotten yet another good press at the Kraken end of the ice, trying to make it 3-0, and the Kraken still struggling at this point to get double-digit shots on goal, they do get a good press in the offensive end, and it is that line of McCann, Tatar, and Eberle who finally get the Kraken on the board. It's Tatar getting the puck out from behind the net, circling up in front of it, taking a shot off on net from the slot with a good screen in front by McCann, who the puck bounces off of, but right out in front of him as he's looking towards the ice. He gets to that rebound, at least gets it a little bit off to the side where Eberle collects it, forehand to backhand, and shoves it into the corner of the net before Samsonov has any chance to get to the post. The Kraken are on the board and back to within one. It's 2-1 and very much a game. So for number 7, it's his 7th of the season, as both Tatar and McCann pick up their 12th assists. And the Kraken, well, the Leafs do actually try to respond to this and nearly get a third goal before the second intermission, but they are not able to do so thanks to Joey Gourde, who has a couple of pretty nice saves in this game, consistent for him. We go to the third period with the Kraken down 1, and through the first half of this third period, the Kraken do press in the offensive end, but just cannot get a shot on net. They do get a couple around the net and some shot blocks, but do not get a shot on net for the first 13 minutes, I think it was, of this third period. Now they do eventually get some shots on goal in this period, 4 to be exact, trailing by 1 going into the period. They get 4 shots on goal against a struggling goaltender, but at least one of those 4 shots in the final 7 minutes was a very dangerous one, and if Samsonov had been playing the way he had played the entire rest of the season leading into this night, it probably would have ended up in the back of the net, but he makes an even better save than the one he made on Schwartz early on in the game. I think it was on McCann on this one. It's off of another rebound, and it absolutely should have been the back of the net, but he comes up with a massive save as just the puck couldn't quite get lifted above the pad, and the Kraken are not able to get that second goal, eventually going empty net with about a minute left, which it doesn't take too long before McCabe finds the empty net, and it's 3-1 Leafs. So for the Kraken, they drop their 4th straight. They get 17 shots on goal, a tie for a franchise low in a single game with 3 other games, I'm pretty sure, against a team that was on the second half of a back-to-back, playing a goaltender who had been struggling all season, and the Kraken really didn't test him all that much. Unfortunately, if they had tested him a little bit more, maybe they would have found some more holes. They just weren't able to get anything going offensively. Though again, there it is at least somewhat understandable why the Kraken had so much offensive difficulty in this game. It is a talented team they are playing against, and they were playing down 2 of their 3 best forwards. Probably their 2 best forwards, and certainly playing down 2 basically all game, with Devon Shore getting just under 6 minutes of ice time, and John Hayden getting just under 4.5 minutes. Then also the lines basically in a blender all game long, so really no consistency when it came to who the different guys were playing with, aside from the McCann line with Tatar and Eberle. Now they had better be able to figure out how to get more offense come these next 4 games, as 3 of them are against opponents the Kraken have no business losing to, no matter what excuses you might be able to have for the team when it comes to health and available players. As their next game is against a Chicago Blackhawks team that is just downright terrible, then they get a Blues team that has been playing pretty well, but then their last 2 games are against the Blue Jackets and Sharks before the All-Star break. Those 3 games, outside of the Blues one, 3 games that they absolutely need to win, and even the game against the Blues is almost a need to win now that they've lost these 4 straight, given that the Blues are a team that are right neck and neck with them when it comes to this playoff race for those 2 wildcard positions. Anyway, with all that being said, this video's already gone on pretty long. Certainly the recording of it has taken way longer than I would have liked, so let's get to the Kraken 3 stars and close this one out and hopefully get to another win against the Blackhawks on that game coming up here in a few days' time. The Kraken do at least get 2 more days rest, so hopefully that at least helps get them a little bit more healthy, though it didn't really work with this last 2 days rest. Either way, 2 more days before that game against Chicago and the final 4 games before the All-Star break, which could not be coming at a better time for the Kraken. I mean, it could have come a week ago. That certainly would have helped quite a bit, but either way, with the Kraken 3 stars, which as always are brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon, If you want to help support the channel a little bit more than you already are by watching the video to this point, you can go to the link down below and help support on Patreon as well and help decide these Kraken stars after every Kraken game. My first star is going to be Jordan Eberle. He continues to remain hot through whatever kept him out of that one practice between the two games. Jared McCann, I'm also going to give a star. He was fantastic in this game. And then the third star, I'm kind of between Joey Decord and Brandon Tanev. I think Decord probably did have the better game, but because Decord's gotten so many stars, and Tanev certainly brought the energy there early on in the game, I'm going to give it to Tanev. So we'll go Eberle 1, McCann 2, and Tanev 3. Let me know what you think down in the comments, though, how you're feeling now that the Kraken have lost 4 straight coming out of those 9-game winning streak. And yeah, just in general, obviously not the most fun game here against the Leafs. Otherwise, if you made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy the video about the stuff down below that helps support the channel, like and subscribe, of course. I'd appreciate using them. And other than that, power rankings will be out tomorrow. Again, because the Kraken played on Sunday, they get pushed a day back. So yeah, power rankings will be a day late, but still coming out Tuesday morning rather than Monday morning. I'll record them tomorrow night or tonight here on Monday. Other than that, though, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.